And so if you remember, we were talking about if you refer to a certain field as an irrigated field, is that just the name of the field? Can't you just interpret that as being the name of the field, like Hidden Valley? But it's not actually an irrigated field. And that could be the confusion in the bill of sale. So really it's just how much do you have to specify, how much irrigation the field needs, and if there's actually an orchard there. So we're going to finish that discussion today. We'll go back and review a little bit from last week just to get us oriented, then we'll continue. So we're on page 149. It's verse 3, number 3. Ima marlo chachorli sadeh beit hashluchim zeh. So and this is repeating the Mishnah, which is just a page and a half before. So rent me this irrigated field. If that's what's in the contract, rent me this irrigated field, and if you remember, there's a so the idea is that if you say that, rent me this irrigated field, and then the source of irrigation dries up, then he doesn't have to pay rent because he specified in the contract as an irrigated field. So now the Talmud objects, Amai, why should that be? Lema le shma ba'al mamri lach. So the owner could just say, it's just the name of the field. Irrigated field doesn't mean it's irrigated. Just because it's called irrigated field doesn't mean it's an irrigated field. That's just the name of the field. And it sounds absurd to us, but I said there's lots and lots of examples of that. Old Orchard in Skokie, it's not an orchard, it's a shopping mall. So if you buy Old Orchard and you're expecting to get orange trees, you're not going to get orange trees. It's the name of the shopping mall.
I'll raise the same
Well, let's finish the whole thing. And then Hidden Valley, is actually not hidden and it's not a valley, but it's called Hidden Valley. And so, so names sometimes take, and so the thing changes. Okay, so that's the objection. Milo Tanya, and now they have actually a Mishnah, a Baraita. It's not a Mishnah, but it's a Baraita teaching that says, Ha'omer l'chaveiro, Beit Kor afar ani mocher lecha. I'm selling you this field that's called Beit Kor. Kor is a unit of measurement, and it refers to how much seed you need. So that's the name of the field. Afal pisha ein bo el letech, but it actually uses much more seed for it. So so the name of the field is Beit Kor. Kor is a unit of measure for seed, and it turns out you need much more seed. So higio, but the sale still holds because it was up to the buyer to really specify not just the name of the field, but how much seed the field requires. So the name doesn't necessarily tell you what the field is. So the teaching is that the sale is valid, if that's the name, even if the name of the field doesn't adequately describe what's going on there. Shalom acharlo el shma, because that's just that all he sold to him was the name of it. V'hu demit karei beit kor, and that's the title of it. It's what it's called. We're going to keep going. They give a bunch of examples, and then they will answer this objection. Remember, it's an objection to the Mishnah, so it's not going to hold because the Mishnah is always right. So they're really, the Mishnah is authoritative. So when they object to things from the Mishnah, it's not like they're playing intellectual games, but they're trying to clarify what exactly is going on. And this could be an objection to the Mishnah. I'm going to keep going. Page 150. Karma ani mocher lecha. I'm selling you, if this is in the document, it says, I'm selling you this vineyard. Afal pisha ein bo kfanim, but there's not a single grape in the whole vineyard because it's called vineyard, but it's not. You can make fun of this, but there's a neighborhood in Israel, Ein Kerem, right, which doesn't have a single vineyard there, and it used to be a vineyard. So if someone buys the neighborhood Ein Kerem, expecting to get a whole harvest of grapes, they'll be very disappointed. But at one point there were grapes there, so this is an ancient thing. Higio, so the sale holds even if there's no grapes there. Shalom acharlo el shma, v'hu demit karei karma. Now they give another example, Pardes, or orchard. I already gave the example of Old Orchard in Skokie, which is a shopping mall. Ani mocher lecha afal pisha ein bo rimonim, even though there are no pomegranates. So the word Pardes used to actually just refer to a place where there are pomegranates, and then it grows to include any kind of fruit. So you also see how language changes too. So you're expecting pomegranates at this place where that's called Orchard, and you show up and you find out there's just it's just shopping outlets. That's the name of the place. So you have to check that out before you buy it. Higio. Shalom acharlo el shma. It's a formula. You just sold him the name. V'hu demit karei pardasa, and it's called a pardes. That's just the name of it. It's called Orchard. Okay, that's that end quote. That's the end of the Baraita. So the Baraita seems to indicate the name of something on the document doesn't have to indicate what exactly it is. So then the question is, so why does our Mishnah say that if I sold you this irrigated field, I have to make sure that to provide irrigation? Because maybe irrigated field is just the name of it. Okay, that's the objection. I think we're clear with the objection. So now they just play it at Alma Amar Shema Ba'alma Amrei Lach. So then what we're learning is that when you put something in a document, whatever it is, this by the way is a bill of sale, which is different than a rental agreement or a lessee agreement, but they're trying to make that analogy. Okay, so you could say, so in this rental agreement, the owner could just say, it's just the name of the place. I don't have to provide you with the irrigation source. Or just because the irrigation source dried up doesn't mean that you don't have to pay me rent, because it's just the name. Hachinami nemaleh. So it should also be Shema Ba'alma Amrei Lach. So just like in that case, he's just selling him a name. In this case, he's renting him a name. Okay. Now Shmuel's going to answer that objection. All right. Now we're clear what the objection is. So Shmuel's going to answer it. Amar Shmuel lo kashya. So Shmuel says that's not a difficulty. The difficulty is between the cases where it's a sale versus the cases where it's a rental. Whereas in the case of a sale, the name of the place doesn't matter. It doesn't indicate what's there. So he's going to say there's not a conflict in this. Hadamarle machkir lechoker. Okay. So when the renter, so the person, let's say the owner, so when the owner tells this to the renter, in that case, the rental agreement holds. So if I'm the owner of it and I say, I'm renting you this irrigated field, and you shake my hand and say, absolutely, okay. In that case, all I've agreed to as the owner is that this is the name of the field. I actually haven't agreed to provide the water, the irrigation. But keep going. Had amarle chocher lemachkir. But the Mishnah is referring to when the renter says to the owner, hey, you're renting to me an irrigated field. As soon as the renter specifies irrigated field, that word has to cross his lips. So it's got to be in. So what it tells us is if it's in the rental agreement and the renter signs it. So as soon as the renter says specifically, I am renting from you an irrigated field, that obligates the owner. Because the owner at that point has to say, well, no, it's not an irrigated field. It's actually just the name of the field. So in other words, the Mishnah holds only if the renter specifies and makes sure. So in other words, it's the responsibility of the renter, not the owner. It's the responsibility of the renter to check and make sure what the field needs before renting it. That's Shmuel's answer. Yeah.
You have a problem here with language because in English you have these specifics like and this.
Yeah.
Say an irrigated field.
Yeah. This irrigated field. Yeah.
You're implying that it is an irrigated.
So we're going to get to that.
If you say I am selling you irrigated field.
Right.
That would be a name.
No, but you have it in Hebrew too. So it's not just in English. You have the word this. You have zeh. You have the word zeh.
If you have that, then that means that.
Okay, so we'll hold on. We're going to get to that. Was there another question? Yeah.
Can we just stretch it a little bit?
Yeah.
Be'er Sheva.
Beersheba, yeah.
Nothing indicated about
Field.
sale of water. Be'er Sheva means 7 wells, of course, of water, right at the edge of the
But it's
desert.
accepted. Everybody accepts it as the name.
That's what I'm saying. Because
Irrigated
it's a name
field
only.
is only accepted by the owner, and he made it up at that because he needed to.
And as far as I remember, it was Abraham, but that's a side story. So it's no sales transaction. In other words, can you name and place with knowing there's not going to be a sale?
Sure.
But what if the
It's
sale will be
accepted.
5 years from now?
Everybody accepts it that way.
I'm naming my house Huge Mansion. and I'm gonna sell it. And I'm gonna sell it to you. And I'll tell you something. If you buy it without checking it out, that's your fault. Yeah, I know. I'll buy that Huge Mansion. So this is actually saying buyer beware, renter beware. The renter, and it's not an unusual. The rent. Obviously, the owner is going to try to make it as attractive as possible to get a renter to come. The renter has to check it out and make sure that I think that makes some sense. So I'm going to keep going. Number 12.
1 second.
Gold mine. Why
How about capital letters? Modern Hebrew.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, right? Yeah. So capital letters would make things more interesting because a capital letter then refers to a proper noun. So that's so Hidden Valley is the name of it, right? Yeah, and they don't have capital letters in Hebrew.
Even today.
No, they don't have capital letters in Hebrew. No. no. So yeah, that is an issue in Hebrew too. You can't always tell if you're referring to a name or an adjective. Yeah, so it takes you a fraction of a second longer to read Hebrew. Did you know that, by the way? That's true. It takes slightly longer to read Hebrew than it does to English. That's one of the reasons is there's no capital letters, so the mind can't make that recognition instantaneously like we do. And also, there's no vowels, so you have to spend some time. Sometimes it's not very much time, but it takes slightly longer to read Hebrew.
Exception, Rabbi.
Even if you're a native Israel Hebrew speaker, it's true. Yeah.
I would just kidding.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well there's exceptions too.
You
Yeah.
did make a point though that you said that the
Luckily, Jews are smarter, so we make up for it. So I taped. I know I said that live. Yeah. Just joking. It's
you have a lessee. You said must mention that it's an irrigated field. Now, if the lessor says to him, "I will lease you this field, this irrigated field," and the lessee now says, "I will take that irrigated field."
Yes, he says irrigated field. That's it.
As long as he says the word.
As long as he says irrigated field. Remember, I mean, obviously, this is before everything would be in a document. There was much more informal time. Yeah, I mean, but even then, most documents were written. But there would be times when there wouldn't be because paper would be expensive and finding a scribe, and it's just much more. And today, so that they're referring to. You have to understand that too. They're referring to a time when there would be more informal agreements, and then the judges would have to say, well, what did you say? What did you agree to? They wouldn't have the contract in front of them. When you have the contract in front of you, it's much easier to adjudicate. But here, they're assuming that they actually have to ask, and there have to be witnesses. What did you agree to? And so once the renter says, I agreed to this, and he's got witnesses for it, then they're saying, okay, then. But if it was just the owner that said it, and the renter never actually used those words, and the owner can prove that, then at that point the owner doesn't have to pay for the irrigation expenses, and the renter does have to pay back because the owner was clear about what he was renting, and the renter didn't really take the time to check it out. I want to continue because it's I want to get to the next Mishnah. So Amar le machkir lechocher ashmal ma'alma. So when the owner says to the renter, we can assume that's just the name of it. Amar le chocher le machkir. But when the renter says to the owner, kpeda. Kpeda means that it's not just the name of it. You have to make sure that it's actually the characteristic, that there's irrigation field. Okay, so that's an interesting distinction between what the owner has to say and what the renter has to check out, and then who says what. Okay, now we have a different take on the whole thing. Okay, which is on the next page 151. Ravina. Now, Ravina often will come at the end of a discussion because Ravina is one of the editors of the Ravashi and Ravina were the editors of the Gemara. So they come to, they often come at the end of a discussion. Okay, which doesn't mean they're necessarily more authoritative, but they often get the last word. So Ravina Amar. So Ravina says Ida ve'idi damar le machkir le mechocher. He says no. In both cases, it's the owner that says it to the renter. That's not the issue. What he's basically saying is the issue is not who says it. That's not the issue. This is the issue. And it's exactly what Michael is saying. Meide kamar zeh. He said because in the Mishnah it's this field. As soon as you say this irrigated field, so you anticipated this objection exactly. That's why I didn't want to deal with it right then. So Ravina says it's the fact that he says zeh, this irrigated field means that you owe the person an irrigated field. It's not like I'm giving you hidden valley. I'm giving you this hidden valley. This hidden valley means that it's both hidden and it's a valley because you are specifying exactly the characteristic of this. So then it becomes an adjective and not a proper noun. Yeah.
Unless there's more than one hidden valley.
Yeah. Well, no. So I'm going to go on. No. So it actually gets more specific. Miklal dekai begava askinan. So obviously we're dealing with they are both standing there. They're both there. Right. So the owner, when they're making the agreement to saying I'm giving you this hidden valley, wouldn't say this unless he was there. So the fact that he's there means that they both know what they're dealing with. So in the contract we're talking about, both the owner and the renter are aware of exactly what's going on. It's this irrigated field. So he says this, he's standing there. The only reason that you have the word this and irrigated field at that point is not to specify the name of it, because they would know the name of it, otherwise, but they're standing there, this irrigated field. So the fact that the transaction takes place in the field itself means that the owner understands he's required to provide the the irrigation. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Beit Hashlachim Ma'amalei Lememar. So why does it even have to say irrigated field when he says this? Dikamar le Beit Shlachim Dekai Mahashta. Because the this implies the irrigated field on which we are now standing. And that's all implied by the word this. So the implied this means that, and then it tells us that the contract actually the sale agreement actually has to take place in the place itself. So that way there's no misunderstanding. We all understand what you're getting. Okay. And of course the best thing is to have a detailed written contract. I want to repeat again, it only becomes adjudicated and goes to judges if there's not a written contract. Then they have to figure out, okay, what did you agree to? What didn't you agree to? Then we have to read the Mishnah, and figure out, okay, what happens in the absence of a specified written contract? And then it's, well, were you in the field? And what did you say? And you said this? Okay, well, that's it. This is what you agreed to. Okay, any questions? We're going to continue another Mishnah. Okay, going quickly here.
Is that what Abraham did when he bought the cave?
Actually, Abraham, that's last week's Torah reading, isn't it? Yeah, last week's Torah reading is very specific about it. Yeah. Yeah, Kachmi Meni. Yeah.
Some other place besides.
Right, yeah. Yeah, a lot of the, we're not reading it right now, but a lot of the Torah's land laws are based on those particular verses where Abraham acquires a field. And they figure out, so they use that as the model. This is how Abraham acquired a field. Certainly Abraham would have done it according to Jewish law. So we'll look at what Abraham does and we'll kind of, extend from there, extrapolate from
being the person.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting that actual scene is very detailed. So the Bible itself gives some detailed instructions then for purchasing a field, because there's a lot of detail, more than you expect from your average biblical scene. But part of it is that the Bible wants to make very clear that Abraham has a claim to that city and to that cave. So then the Torah is giving all the specifics, so nobody should doubt that it's the family of Abraham that owns that cave, which tells us when those stories were written there probably was some doubt. And so probably part of the purpose of those stories is to indicate for sure, for their clear purposes, that we do own this cave. And by the way, it's of course still under dispute.
That's exactly
right. And the issue, of course, we have our document, Jews, called the Torah, that proves our ownership. They have their document called the Quran, which proves their ownership. So what are you going to do? It's two sacred documents, and neither of us accept the validity of the other person's document. So who's got the stronger army? That's who wins.
That's
right? I mean, what?
Makes right.
What?
Does the Quran actually speak to the Moshe?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, the Quran speaks to Abraham, so they claim Abraham.
Yeah.
So if they claim Abraham, we claim Abraham. Let's not get into it, please. Let's not get into it. Okay. Forgive me for bringing it up, but actually Irv brought it up, but I extended it. All right, the Mishnah, page 151. Hamikabel sadeh mechavero v'hovira. So again, you have the mikabel, and it's a technical word there. You receive a field from somebody, but it's receiving it in the sense of leasing it, as opposed to buying it. The word for buying would be different. Yeah, lakach, taking a field. Yeah, okay. V'hovira, and he lets it go fallow. So remember, the sharecropping agreement is that you work the land. Right. So you work the land and you get a percentage. So if this is assuming it's percent, so the agreement is percentage, and you don't do any work on it, so there's nothing. Yeah, so 30% of nothing is nothing. So you go to the renter and say, sorry, I decided not to do any work, so I don't really do anything. So yeah.
So since it's the Shemitah year, I'm just wondering what happens in that case.
Oh, I think the Shemitah year is the same thing. I mean, everybody, the Shemitah year, everybody, you're not allowed to. Well, let's say, so if according to Jewish law, you can't work the field, then the owner can't expect you to work the field, because the cantor, just like the owner can't expect you to work on Shabbat, the owner can't go say, hey, I see here one day out of a week you don't work at all. What's going on here? The Shabbat, so I don't work on Shabbat. So yeah, I mean, so that would be clear.
Right.
Even there wouldn't be any contract. By the way, there couldn't be any contract that would supersede other established Jewish law. So there can't be a contract that says, and I agree to work on Shabbat. It wouldn't be a valid contract. Right. I agree to harvest on the Shemitah year. It wouldn't be valid. So this is normal conditions. The guy just decides not to work the field. I mean, maybe I don't know. It doesn't matter. He's lazy, or he's sick. He's leasing some other fields. Doesn't say why. Doesn't matter. Okay, so that's the case. Hamakabel sadeh mechavero v'hovira, lets it go fallow. Shamin ota kama ru'aya lasot. So you have to estimate how much, let's say, it doesn't say this, but let's say an average farmer, the average farmer would have made during that year, vinoteno, and then you have to pay him. Because the owner has the right to expect that he was going to get the income from the land.
Right.
So even though that I decided not to work, that doesn't work. In your standard leasing agreement, the owner has the right to expect some minimum. We don't know what the minimum is right now. That's interesting, and we'll have to figure that out. The word they have there is shamin. You estimate. You make an estimate. So obviously there's a formula, and they'll tell us what the formula is. Okay.
So the name of the field was Plowed Field.
Yeah.
So that he doesn't have to do the work. I mean, he didn't say he was going to plow it.
Right. I know. So, but what's interesting here is they're saying that that's implied. That's implied. So you can't get away with that. It's implied that he's going to do the work, and your average owner dealing with your average renter has the right to assume that work is going to be done, whether it's in the contract or not.
Does that go back to?
Oh no, I shouldn't say that. Well, I shouldn't. Let me just correct that. It's not whether it's in the contract or not. All of this is in the absence of. I mean, you could write in your contract, and if I choose to do no work, you get no money. Right. Then it's in the contract. This is in the absence of a contract or some kind of oral agreement. Now, this is a little slippery because what we're going to get to now is some language that was in boilerplate agreements, but it wasn't written down. And it's interesting because you get to see here the development of written contracts in Jewish law. Yeah.
Doesn't that go back to our a few weeks ago with if it goes back to custom if there's nothing written and the custom be that the
that's right, it does. It's a good point. It's minhag hamakom, so the custom becomes. So this is a little stronger than custom at this point because it's in the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, okay, and I'll finish it. Shekach kotevlo, because this is what he writes for him. So when they say he writes for him this, I'm going to get to what this means, but the Mishnah is saying that it's implied then. What's implied is, and it's implied through years and years of practice. The following is implied. So when it says kakotevlo, it doesn't mean he actually wrote it for him. He means by implication, he is promising this. Im ovir velo aved, ashalem b'meitava. If I let it go fallow and I don't work the land, I still have to pay you, then b'meitava, with the best of the fruits. So let me explain a little bit. So remember, this was not a cash economy. Right. So when he's agreeing to a third of the strawberry crop, he's going to give him strawberries. He's not going to give him cash. Right. And because the people didn't, it's not like they didn't have cash, but they worked more with crops than with cash. So then the rabbis have to actually get specific about what kind of strawberries do I give you. Because obviously what I'd like to do is give you the smallest, worst strawberries. So there's lots of Mishnah writing about you can't do that. You give the middle amount, right? I mean, you give your average strawberries, right? And but when you're in violation, so when it becomes a penalty, and you say, okay, you owe that guy a third of your strawberry crop, then the law could specify, and it's got to be the best strawberries. That's the best of the crop, your finest crop. So in this case, it's saying that's what you owe the owner. You owe the owner whatever percentage. I'm just throwing out a third, but you owe the owner the percentage and using the best of the strawberries, not the worst of the strawberries. So now the renter who doesn't have any strawberries at all, because he wasn't working the land, has to either come up in cash, so there's a way to get the cash, or has to buy some strawberries and give them over to the owner. And it's materially significant that it's the best of the strawberries and not the average kind or the worst of it. Okay, that's the end of the Mishnah. It's a short Mishnah. Okay. Now I'll read a little bit more from the Gemara, but there's some interesting discussion of layperson's agreements versus a technical contract. So a technical contract, in our parlance, is going to be written by a lawyer, and only lawyers will understand it. So, right, and even they will disagree on what it means. So there's a layperson's contract is two people who aren't lawyers shake their hands. They use very understandable general language, and in those days, and I think today too, lawyers have to tell me, judges will analyze both. I mean, if I have a dispute with you and we have no contract, but we both remember some language. Or let's say we drew up a contract ourselves and we didn't have lawyers, and we just kind of drew up something ourselves, non-technical language, we just drew it up ourselves. So I think if it comes to a judge, the judge is maybe going to ask, so there's two possibilities. The judge could say, hey, you didn't get lawyers, you didn't get witnesses, this isn't how we do things in this county, I'm not even going to look at the case. That's one possibility. The other possibility is the judge is going to say, well, tell me what you agreed to. And do you have any documents? Let me look at that. So the rabbis actually disagreed here about what to do. Some rabbis would say, well, you didn't draw up a contract, and we've got ways to do that. I don't see witnesses. There's not any way I can rule on this. But some rabbis would actually say, well, tell me what you said. Tell me before you shook hands. So Rabbi Meir hayad doresh l'shon hediyot. This is page 152. So Rabbi Meir would deal with contracts that were just written by lay people. Okay, and then you have to have some principles. You have to help you understand what was said when. Ditanya, as it has said, Rabbi Meir Omer. So Rabbi Meir says, Imo vir velo aved ashalem b'meitava, because Rabbi Meir would say, this is a general principle, even if there wasn't a contract. So he would say this, and he would say this was understood, even in two people that just shake their hand. He would say, if you rent the land and you don't work the land, you pay with the premium, right? You pay. And he said that's understood, even if it's just a handshake. It doesn't matter if there's not a formal contract or not, because that's generally how we understand the process, the transaction. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That becomes the origin of this Mishnah. So because Rabbi Meir makes that claim, then it makes its way into the Mishnah. That's why we're discussing it right now. There are rabbis that disagree with him, so we'll read those.
Yeah, but it would make it a lot easier if the default occurred in the second or the third year of the field.
Yeah, for 2 years. Oh, yes, right.